Hey everyone, welcome back to Chasing Success Podcast. This one is going to be a little bit different because it's more of an update podcast, and you can find it on Chasing Success Podcast or you can find it on the IMEO YouTube channel. So if you did not follow me on my social channels, then you are not aware of what's been going on in the background, and that's what I want to talk about. In the last video or last podcast episode, I alluded to what I've been working on and what might happen to this podcast channel. So today I'm just going to keep it short and I'm going to give you a brief update on what's happening. So last week and the week before last, I believe, I posted an Instagram post and then I posted it on LinkedIn as well. But that post was talking about how IMEO is going to be decommissioned in the near future, but it's for good reason. And the reason is the part that I alluded to on the last episode is that I am going 100% all in on building my own software. Now, this software is going to help 100% remote organizations, remote workforce, and hybrid companies. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned on this journey, because what you'll be seeing as part of this update and in the future of this podcast is some things that are shifting, right? So season 1 was completed last year. We're on season 2 right now. It's been a little bit different, right? But what we will be doing is focusing more on the future of work. So rather than individual, there might be some of these sprinkled in and out, rather than individual episodes where it's talking about career, life, and all that kind of stuff. What we're going to be talking about is the future of work. And more specifically, whenever I say the future of work, I'm talking about how can we improve work to make it more flexible, inclusive, and more fulfilling. Because whenever we created IMEO, it stood for improving management, employees, and organizations. We're not necessarily going away from that vision per se. We're just doing it in a different manner, right? So the technology and the software that I'm working on building is going to provide a way to create a better workforce, to create a better work culture, and to create culture in a remote environment. So like I said, stay tuned on that. I don't want to go too far into detail right now, but eventually and soon I'll be launching the company. So you'll know the name of the company. You'll understand the details of the products or the modules that are included, right? And then some of this podcast will be the software updates specific, because what I'm going to be doing is it's going to take a few months to build this MVP or minimum viable product, the first version of the software. And so what I want to do is build in public, and I want to be able to create a community who believes in the future of work. And just to dive in more on that future of work concept or phrase, because it is broad, it can mean anything. What I'm specifically talking about is being in the traditional office setting, working 5 days a week, 9 to 5, commuting to work, and going away from what we were all able to do if you have a knowledge working job. I have to put that in there because not all jobs can be remote, right? But what we've been doing over the pandemic is working remotely. And now all of a sudden, since COVID is no longer an emergency, we don't have the pandemic going on anymore. The I call them old school thinkers are telling their employees that they have to go back into the office. And what we see is that there is a lot of pushback from employees. Now, they're not pushing back that we don't want to ever come back to the office, but what they are pushing back on is that they want the flexibility that remote work gives them. So a lot of companies are compromising, I would say, and that's a lenient word because I feel like they're not necessarily compromising. It's that the employees are putting them in a chokehold, rightfully so, because I agree with this, and telling them, no, we're not going back to the old ways of working. Whenever I worked from home, I didn't have to commute. I had less stress. I had more flexibility. I was able to see my family more. Now you're asking me to go back whenever I prove that I can work remotely, right? And so those are the types of things that we're going to be talking about. And for example, I can't remember if it was on this podcast or if it was on a YouTube video or just a video that I put out there on Instagram. But I remember Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan Chase, saying that you cannot be productive outside of the office. And my issue with that is I think that whenever people say, and just foreshadowing, I like Jamie Dimon. I think he's a great CEO and he's been able to do amazing things, obviously, right? He's something that I aspire to be down the road. But I will say, I do think that a lot of these CEOs, whenever they're talking about bringing people back into the office, they don't have the best interests of the employees at heart, right? In my mind, they want people to be back in the office so they can control them, so they can monitor them. Because what's scarier to a CEO than having somebody work from home, being able to do the laundry, being able to watch a video or TV, or being able to spend time with their family instead of being 100% focused at work in an office, right? I say that sarcastically, but that is scary to them because that's what they've known. And now on the other side is whenever we talk about remote work, a lot of people talk about that personal connection can't be truly imitated compared to physical interaction. And I'm a case study on this. My founding advisor, who used to be my manager at Kumu, the last company that I worked for, we started working together in February, started having interviews in January, but started working together in February of 2021. And we did not see each other in person until 8, 9, 10 months later. And that never stopped us from forming a true friendship, a true manager-employee relationship, a true trusting relationship, right? And the reason is it's not about the physical touch. It's about the intentionality. So if you're saying that like these people have to be in the office, I want you to ask yourself, do you really think that? Have you taken the time to think about what you're saying? And do you truly believe that? Because I think if these people, the CEOs who are trying to bring people back in the office, the managers who are trying to bring people back in the office where they know that they can work 100% remotely or they can set up a more flexible environment with hybrid, if they truly think about that question, what is the reason I want my employees back in the office? The truth is one, well, it's what I grew up doing. So I had to be in the office. I want them to be in the office. And I don't think that they're going to be as productive at home, when the truth is the statistics don't add up to what they're saying, right? People who are working from home are 74% more likely to be a happy employee. And then on top of that, happy employees are 20% more productive. And then on top of that, it's proven that remote workers produce higher levels of outputs or outcomes than people who work in the office. So my suggestion is to not ever go back into the office, but let's change the way that we think about working in an office. For example, right? Everybody's 100% remote. Let's say that that's the company that I'm going to build. It's going to be 100% remote. We're not going to have any offices. But guess what we are going to do? We're going to have own sites. Just like people used to have off sites, we're going to have own sites. So people can get to see each other, to experience them outside of the squares, as I say. Like you're in a Zoom meeting or a team meeting. Let's get to know people outside of the squares. And whenever the great thing about this is when people are at home, they're working, they're building these relationships, they're fostering these relationships in an intentional way. Because if you work remotely, you can't just let things happen. You have to be intentional about it, right? And we're building a software that helps companies do that easier. But the other thing is whenever you meet in person, Now you can spend a little bit of time on business, have that specific thing that you guys want to do that you maybe couldn't do as a remote organization, but then spend the majority of the time building culture, understanding who your coworkers are. And what you'll see is that goes such a long way. Simon Sinek, I know, look, I respect these people that I talk about, but Simon Sinek was on a podcast before, and he was saying that you cannot recreate a physical relationship virtually through these video conferencing tools. But again, I'm a use case. That's I don't think that's true. But he did bring up a good point, because he said whenever people were asked to go remote when the pandemic happened, a lot of these people or coworkers already knew each other from the office. So they were able to build that culture, or they were able to build that trusting relationship. But again, I'm going to debunk that, because I'm a spitting image of that. Not only my manager have I been able to build a trusting relationship with, or my ex-manager, my founding advisor now, but I've also have a handful of people that I stay in contact with, even though that we're no longer working at Kumo after it got acquired, right? So these myths, these misconceptions, these people who are talking without statistics are giving people the wrong information. And so that's what we're going to be talking about in this podcast from now on, right? We're going to be talking about how can we build the future of work. And what I want to do is create a community around this. So if you're interested in joining the community, leave a comment if you're watching this on YouTube, or send me an email, zwright@imeoconsulting.com, right? So send me an email and say, hey, I want to be a part of the future of work community that you're building. Right. And another way to do that is to stay up to date with this podcast and our YouTube channel. So follow us, share it with people, and let's start to build a better working world, right? That's what we want to do. We want to get away from the constraints and limitations of a physical office. We want to make the lives of other people who are working better by having a flexible, inclusive, and fulfilling way to work. And what we see is that that's remote, or it's hybrid, or it's just that flexibility and autonomy. So I'm going to have to look back and listen to this and make sure that it makes sense before I post it. But the main part of this episode is to give you an update, because I know I missed last week, and so I wanted to stay consistent. But what I will say is, as we transform this podcast into what I'm talking about today, there might be some skipped episodes on a weekly basis, right? But our goal is to, because what I like to do before I launched this podcast, I want to say 15 or 16 episodes in the vault, right? So I had them planned out, and I want to do the same thing here. So as I transition this podcast from Chasing Success to the Future of Work, we don't know the title of the podcast yet, but as I transition that, just bear with me, because I'm not going to be as consistent as possible. But once we get all the changes out of the way, then we'll get back to being consistent, and we might even be more consistent, meaning we were dropping bi-weekly podcast videos. We might be doing weekly videos, or we might be doing bi-weekly in the sense of multiple episodes in 1 week. Because as I build my software, and it's specifically for 100% remote companies and hybrid companies, and specifically the remote workforce, to help people build culture remotely, as we go through this, I might get inspired because I'm researching, I'm reading all these stats, I'm doing so many things to understand as much as I can. Even though I've worked remotely for 4 years now, maybe 5 at this point, I'm still learning things as I'm building it, because we're going through product validation, market analysis, all these types of things. So in the next episode, I can't promise anything, but I feel like we will have the company launched by then. So stay tuned for that. If you want to be updated on that, make sure to follow this page, subscribe, set up the notifications. And if you feel like anybody out there would be interested in seeing this video or hearing this video, share it with them, because there are a lot of pioneers out there in the remote work environment, in remote work organizations, and we are going to change and make the way we work better. So if you want to jump on that, follow, do all the things that you have to get updated. But like I said, I'm going to look back and listen to this to make sure that it all flows in together. But the main point of this episode is to update you on some of the changes that will happen. And if you don't like those changes, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to follow us, because I understand that our ICP or our target audience is changing, right? I think it's still important. And I think that the people who follow us now will still be interested in a lot of the topics that we talk about. But it's going to be more so about the future of work and building in public with our software. So if that interests you, keep listening, share it to people who you think will also like that. And we'll see you on the next episode. It'll be a little bit more organized, but thanks for sticking with me and following this journey as we decommission IMEO. We take away all the distractions that we have and we focus 100% on this software, because I think it is really going to be game changing. And once we learn more, or once we say more about the software, if you ever are interested, just reach out to us and let's have a conversation. Once again, thanks so much for listening to this choppy podcast episode, and we will see you on the next episode.